In 1910, two brand-new steam locomotives vanished beneath Lake Superior during a routine crossing near Marquette. Never recovered, their story became legend. The lost locomotive at the bottom of the lake is more than a shipwreck. It's a forgotten chapter of industrial ambition and disaster. But what forced these 80-ton machines to sink over 200 feet, and why did they remain hidden for decades? The stakes began long before the storm. By the dawn of the 20th century, railroads had become the arteries of North American industry. Companies like the Lake Superior and Ishpeming Railway were laying track deep into the Upper Peninsula, chasing iron ore, timber, and the promise of new markets. Yet the very geography that fueled this expansion also created its greatest obstacles. Dense forests, wild rivers, and the sheer distance between settlements made overland transport for heavy equipment nearly impossible. Rail lines reached isolated towns, but the only practical way to deliver massive machinery, like steam locomotives weighing 80 tons each, was by water. The Great Lakes became the main highway for these industrial giants. Shipyards in Pennsylvania and factories in Philadelphia turned out engines for the frontier, but the final leg of their journey depended on barges and rail ferries. These vessels hauled everything from rails to rolling stock, braving unpredictable weather and the vast, cold expanse of Lake Superior. For manufacturers such as Baldwin Locomotive Works, and for the railroad operators waiting at remote ports like Marquette, this method was not a luxury, it was a necessity. The pressure to keep freight moving meant that even the most ambitious logistical plans became routine. Barge contractors specialized in these risky deliveries, reinforcing decks and rigging heavy cables to secure their cargo. Every crossing carried the weight of industrial progress and the hope of a quick, profitable delivery. In an age of relentless growth, the margin for error grew thinner as the loads grew heavier. The system worked until the day it didn't. Wind howled across the barge as the storm struck without warning. Rain hammered the deck, turning every surface slick beneath the crew's boots. Waves, rising higher than the pilot house windows, slammed the hull and rattled the chains meant to hold 80 tons of steel in place. Deckhands scrambled, shouting above the roar, fighting to tighten the cables that anchored the locomotives. Water swept across the deck, loosening chocks and soaking gloved hands numb with cold. In the chaos, a sharp metallic snap rang out. One of the main chains stretched to its limit, parted with a sound like a rifle shot. The first locomotive lurched forward, its wheels rolling helplessly on the wet planks. Crewmen dove for safety as the engine crashed through the railings and vanished into the black water. The second followed within seconds, dragged by the sudden shift in weight. Both engines plunged straight down, swallowed by the lake. In less than a minute, the cargo was gone. Two brand-new Baldwin 280 consolidations, lost to the depths. The barge, battered but afloat, drifted in stunned silence. Below, the locomotive settled upright on the lakebed, more than 230 feet beneath the surface, beyond the reach of any salvage crew. For the men on board, the disaster was over in moments, but its mark would last for generations. In the world of early 20th century railroading, few machines were as trusted as the Baldwin 280 consolidation. Railroad historian Dr. Linda Farley describes these locomotives as the backbone of frontier freight, compact, powerful, and designed to handle the roughest track the North could offer. The 280 wheel arrangement, 2 leading wheels, 8 driving wheels, no trailing wheels, was no accident. This design spread the engine's weight evenly, letting it haul heavy loads of ore or timber over uneven rails without sinking or derailing. Each engine weighed close to 80 tons, yet was nimble enough for the tight curves and steep grades found in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Baldwin Locomotive Works, based in Philadelphia, produced thousands of these engines for railroads across North America. Their reputation for reliability and brute strength made them a favorite for new lines pushing into remote territory. Dr. Dr. Farley notes that for railroads like the Lake Superior and Ishpeming, investing in a pair of Baldwin consolidations was a calculated move. These engines could do the work of larger, more expensive models, but required less maintenance and handled lighter rails without trouble. Moving such massive machines to the edge of the wilderness was never simple. Shipping by barge across the Great Lakes was standard practice, not an exception. Specialized contractors reinforced the decks, and heavy cables secured the engines in place. Every locomotive carried unique builder's plates and serial numbers, vital for tracking, insurance, and decades later, for the divers who would search for traces of the lost engines. Dr. Farley emphasizes that these identification markers weren't just paperwork. They were the only link between a vanished machine and its story. For the men waiting at the docks in Marquette, the arrival of a Baldwin 280 meant more than just another engine. It was the promise of progress, a lifeline for the industries and communities that depended on the rails. Frederick Shannon spent years piecing together rumors, shipping records, and faded insurance claims, convinced that the lost locomotives still waited somewhere in Lake Superior's depths. In the summer of 1985, he assembled a small crew and launched a search unlike any before. Their equipment was basic by modern standards: side-scan sonar, homemade underwater cameras, and heavy wetsuits for the near-freezing water. The plan was simple: sweep the lakebed near Marquette, follow the faintest echoes, and hope for a sign. Day after day, the sonar screen flickered with static and shadows. Then, on a calm afternoon, a pair of unmistakable shapes appeared. Two silhouettes, side by side, upright on the mud. Wheels, boilers, tenders all in place. Shannon's voice, recorded later, still carries the awe. It was like seeing ghosts. They hadn't fallen apart. They were just waiting. The first dive down was a test of nerve and endurance. At more than 200 feet, the water pressed in like stone, and every minute at depth risked decompression sickness. Shannon's team descended into darkness, guided by a thin beam of ROV light. The locomotive stood as if ready to steam away, paint still clinging to the iron, builder's plates glinting beneath a layer of silt. Years of cold, oxygen-starved water had preserved them in a way no one thought possible. Interview segments capture Shannon's excitement. He describes brushing a gloved hand across the Baldwin name, reading serial numbers that matched those from the 1910 shipping ledgers. The team surfaced in near silence, overwhelmed by what they had found. For the first time in 75 years, the lost engines had faces, names, and a story grounded in evidence. Shannon's discovery would soon draw scientists, historians, and preservationists from across the country, all eager to see what Lake Superior had kept hidden for a generation. At 230 feet below the surface, Lake Superior becomes a vault. The water hovers just above freezing, rarely rising beyond 4 degrees Celsius, and oxygen is scarce at these depths. This combination halts the usual decay that eats away at iron and steel on land or in shallower waters. Decades after the locomotives vanished, their steel still rings solid, paint clings to the boilers, and brass plates remain legible beneath a thin layer of silt. In warmer, oxygen-rich lakes, corrosion would have claimed every trace within a generation. Here, the locomotives rest in a natural cold storage, preserved by chemistry as much as by history. Michigan law treats the locomotives as protected cultural heritage. The site's listing on the National Register of Historic Places makes it illegal to disturb, remove, or salvage any part of the wreck. Divers are welcome, but strict guidelines demand a hands-off approach. No artifact can be taken, and even touching is discouraged. A preservation official explains, "These engines are a time capsule. Our job is to ensure they remain undisturbed for future generations." The responsibility is clear: respect the lake's silent guardians. In 1910, two Baldwin 280 consolidation locomotives, each weighing nearly 80 tons, vanished beneath Lake Superior near Marquette during a violent storm, sinking to a depth of about 230 feet. Archival shipping records and eyewitness accounts confirmed the loss, but recovery proved impossible. For 75 years, their fate was debated until Frederick Shannon's 1985 dive team located both engines upright and remarkably preserved. Cold, low-oxygen water had shielded them from decay, making this site one of the best-preserved underwater steam wrecks in the world. Today, Michigan state law and the National Register of Historic Places protect these locomotives. Yet questions remain. What precise chain of events led to the cargo's final plunge? And what stories were lost with the unnamed crew? What is clear is that the locomotives, once symbols of frontier ambition, now serve as a time capsule. Their survival is a testament to both the risks of early industrial expansion and the enduring impact of preservation.